On the 6th of May, 2023, inside Westminster Abbey, Prince William watched his stepmother be crowned queen. He bowed his head at the right moments, played his part in the ancient ceremony, and showed the world a calm, supportive face. There was nothing dramatic about it. And yet, if you knew the full story behind that quiet scene, you'd understand just how remarkable it was. Because the woman being crowned that day was the same woman a young William had once blamed, at least in part, for the unhappiness of his mother. The same woman he first met as a grieving 16 center of that whole story, supporting her as queen. That's the real question. And the real answer has nothing to do with the dramatic showdowns and secret confrontations you'll find in made-up stories online. The truth is quieter, slower, and far more human. It's a story about grief, duty, and the long, careful work of two people learning to coexist for the sake of a man they both love. This is the actual relationship between Prince William and Queen Camilla, as far as it can honestly be known. To understand it, you have to start with the wound, because everything flows from there. In August 1997, Princess Diana was killed in a car crash in Paris. William was 15 years old. His younger brother Harry was 12. The grief that swept across Britain was overwhelming, and at the center of it were two boys who had just lost their mother in front of the entire world. They had to walk behind her coffin through the streets of London while millions watched and wept. For William, Diana wasn't the people's princess or a tabloid figure. She was simply his mum. And in the public mind, the woman most associated with the breakdown of Diana's marriage was Camilla Parker Bowles. Whatever the more complicated truth of that marriage really was, in the eyes of a hurting teenage boy, the lines were not blurry. There was the mother he had lost, and there was the woman his father loved instead. That is the impossible situation into which the first meeting was dropped. According to royal biographers, William met Camilla for the first time in 1998, only about 11 months after Diana's death. He was 16, home from Eton for the weekend, and the meeting took place at his father's London residence. By the accounts that have since emerged, it was an enormously delicate moment for everyone, but perhaps most of all for Camilla. The royal author Christopher Anderson has described how nervous she was, saying she was shaking like a leaf at the prospect of meeting Charles's elder son, and that as soon as William left, she said she needed a gin and tonic. Think about that for a moment. This was a grown woman, decades older than the boy, and she was the one trembling. It tells you she understood exactly what she was walking into and exactly how much was at stake. What happened in the weeks and months after that first meeting was handled with enormous care, because everyone involved understood how fragile the public mood was. Biographers have described how William and Camilla met again quietly, reportedly taking tea together, and then a third time over lunch with Charles. There are accounts suggesting that the story of a relaxed, friendly lunch was deliberately shared with British newspapers, the aim being to reassure a grieving public that Diana's elder son did not object to the woman in his father's life, even so soon after the tragedy. Whether or not every step was as stage-managed as some claim, the basic picture is clear. This was not a natural, organic family forming. It was a delicate process, watched by the whole country, in which a teenage boy's every reaction carried enormous weight, and in which both he and Camilla were navigating something almost impossibly awkward with the eyes of the world on them. William, for his part, behaved with the impeccable manners he had been raised to show, but manners are not the same as warmth, and acceptance does not arrive on a schedule. In those early years, both William and Harry were by most accounts cool and guarded toward Camilla. They were polite, they were correct, but they kept their distance. They were boys who adored their late mother, and the idea of welcoming the woman they associated with her pain was not something either of them could do quickly or easily. That wariness was natural. It would have been strange if it were any other way. What changed things slowly was a realization that came with growing up. As the years passed, William and Harry both began to understand something about their father that mattered more than their own feelings. Charles, after everything, after the divorce, after years of public criticism and personal misery, was genuinely happy with Camilla. She made him laugh. She steadied him. And there's an important detail in how Camilla handled her position that helped enormously. By all accounts, she never tried to replace Diana. She didn't attempt to become a substitute mother to the boys or to erase the woman who came before her. She seemed to understand that such a thing would be both impossible and unwelcome, and so she didn't reach for it. Instead, she aimed for something smaller and more achievable, a civil, friendly relationship on terms the boys could actually accept. That restraint, that willingness not to push, did more to win them over than any grand gesture ever could have. There's a glimpse of how far things had come in something Harry said years later, before his own relationship with the family fractured. In a biography published in 2018, Harry was quoted describing Camilla in surprisingly generous terms, saying she was not a wicked stepmother, that she was a wonderful woman, and that he and William loved her to bits. He even suggested that people should feel sorry for the difficult position Camilla had walked into, rather than for him and his brother. Whatever you make of those words, and whatever changed afterwards, they show that by then a real thaw had taken place. The frightened first meeting of 1998 had given way, over 2 decades, to something workable. It's easy to forget that this was a blending of 2 families, not just the arrival of one new person. Camilla had 2 children of her own from her marriage to Andrew Parker Bowles, a son, Tom, and a daughter, Laura, both close in age to William and Harry. In a strange twist of the family's tangled history, Charles had actually been named godfather to Tom Parker Bowles back in 1974, long before any of the later drama. So the marriage in 2005 didn't just give William a stepmother. It connected 2 households that had orbited each other for decades. Over the years that followed, William also had a front row seat to something the rest of the country watched more slowly: Camilla's gradual transformation in the public eye. The woman who had once been among the most criticized people in Britain quietly built a reputation as a hard-working, uncomplaining royal, taking on serious causes and never generating the kind of scandal that had defined the 1990s. William watched that rehabilitation happen up close, year after year, and it's reasonable to think it shaped how he came to see her. It is one thing to resent a caricature. It is harder to keep resenting a person you watch put in the work, day after day, without complaint. A major milestone in that journey came in 2005, when Charles and Camilla finally married in a civil ceremony at the Windsor Guildhall. By then, William was in his early 20s, and rather than standing in the way of his father's happiness, he was there to support it. He acted as a witness at the ceremony. His presence sent a quiet but unmistakable signal to the public. The sons had made their peace. The marriage that so much of the country had once found impossible to imagine now had the blessing of the next generation. It was a moment of acceptance, achieved not through a dramatic reconciliation, but through years of patient adjustment. It's worth giving credit here to someone who is often left out of this story, and that's Catherine, now the Princess of Wales. By several accounts, Kate played a quiet but important role in smoothing the relationship between William and Camilla. She was reportedly accepting of Camilla earlier and more easily than some others in the family, and her calm, bridge-building instincts helped take some of the old tension out of the dynamic. Families blend slowly, and sometimes it's the person who marries in, free of the original wounds, who helps everyone else move forward. Kate appears to have been that person. Now, this is where honesty matters, because it would be easy to tidy this story up into a neat fairy tale, and the truth is more textured than that. The relationship between William and Camilla has never been a warm, classic stepmother and son bond, and pretending otherwise would be inaccurate. Royal commentators who follow the family closely actually disagree about how close the two really are. Some sources describe their connection today as genuinely warm, even familial, built up over 20 years of shared family life and public duty. Others paint a cooler picture. The biographer Christopher Anderson, for instance, has suggested that William essentially tolerates his stepmother, and that Camilla has always been a little afraid of him, while also acknowledging that William has warmed to her over time. Both of these things can be true at once. Respect and a degree of distance are not contradictions. You can value what someone does for a person you love without feeling deep personal closeness to them. There's one detail, widely reported though it concerns private family matters, that captures this carefully drawn line. It's been said that William made clear Camilla would not be considered a grandmother to his children, on the understanding that his children have only one grandmother on that side, and she died in 1997. Whether the line was drawn quite that explicitly or not, the principle beside Camilla as a dutiful son and future king, and still hold a space for his mother that no one else is permitted to fill. This is also the point where William's path and Harry's path begin to separate, and it's an important part of understanding William specifically. For years, the two brothers handled Camilla in broadly similar ways, with that mixture of public politeness and private reserve. But over time, their approaches diverged sharply. William chose to keep whatever frustrations he had behind closed doors. He dealt with the complicated reality of his stepmother privately, in the way the institution has always preferred, by not airing it in public. Harry took the opposite road. In his 2023 memoir, he wrote about Camilla in much harsher terms than he ever had before, making pointed accusations about her conduct and her ambitions. Those were Harry's own claims and his own account, and they should be read as such. But the contrast tells you a great deal about William. Faced with the same difficult stepmother and the same painful history, William's instinct was discretion. Whatever he felt, he was not going to let it become a public spectacle that might damage his father or the crown. That instinct, the choice to absorb tension quietly rather than broadcast it, is one of the clearest windows we have into the kind of king he intends to be. You could see that divergence laid bare on the day of the coronation itself, in May 2023. William had a central, prominent part in the ceremony. He knelt before his father, the newly crowned king, and pledged his loyalty in a public act of homage that placed him visibly at the heart of the new reign, the loyal heir beside the throne. Harry, by contrast, attended only as a guest. He had stepped back from royal duties years earlier. He was seated several rows back rather than among the working royals, and he left Britain quickly afterwards to return to his family in California. The same event that confirmed William's role at the center of the family confirmed Harry's distance from it. And Camilla, the once impossible figure, sat crowned at the very heart of it all. The image of that day told the whole story in a single frame. The stepmother accepted, the elder son loyal and present, the younger son on the edge and soon gone. If there was a real turning point that drew William and Camilla closer, it was not a confrontation at all. It was illness. In early 2024, the family was hit by a wave of frightening news. In January, Catherine underwent major abdominal surgery and would later reveal she was being treated for cancer. Then, in February 2024, Buckingham Palace announced that King Charles himself had been diagnosed with cancer, discovered during treatment for an unrelated condition. Suddenly, the two people at the center of William's world, his wife and his father, were both seriously unwell at the same time. The king stepped back from public duties to undergo treatment, and William, who had taken time away to care for Kate and their children, returned to frontline royal work to help carry the load. At a charity gala that February, he publicly thanked people for their kind messages of support for both his wife and his father. It was a heavy season for the family. And in that hard season, something shifted in how William saw Camilla. Through Charles's illness, Camilla remained steadfastly at her husband's side, supporting him, accompanying him, and continuing her own duties while he recovered. Royal observers noted that her devotion to Charles during this vulnerable time was real and visible, and that William appreciated it. There's a simple human truth at work here. It's one thing to be wary of the woman who married your father. It's another to watch her quietly hold him up when he is frightened and sick. Adversity has a way of clarifying what matters, and the shared worry over Charles seems to have softened whatever was left of the old distance. As one expert put it, what William values about Camilla is the way she warms his father up and brings out his more human side. During the cancer scare, that quality stopped being an abstraction and became something he could see plainly. That year, 2024, turned out to be one of the most testing the family had faced in a long time, and it changed the texture of their relationships in lasting ways. In March, Catherine released a deeply personal video message confirming that she, too, was being treated for cancer, after weeks of feverish public speculation about her absence. For a period, both the king and the future queen were undergoing cancer treatment at the same time, and the monarchy suddenly looked unexpectedly fragile, with two of its most important figures sidelined by illness. In that vacuum, the people who could step forward did. William carried more of the public load while privately protecting his wife and children. Camilla, in her 70s, kept up a punishing schedule of engagements to ensure the crown remained visible while her husband recovered. There was no rivalry in that moment, no jostling. There was a family under real strain, with each member doing what they could. Hard times tend to either break families apart or quietly weld them together, and for William and Camilla, this stretch seems to have done the latter. Whatever else lay between them, they had now stood shoulder to shoulder through genuine fear, and that is not something easily forgotten. So where does that leave things today? Camilla is queen, and she continues the steady, unflashy work that slowly won the British public over to her across 2 decades, championing causes from literacy to the fight against domestic abuse. William, as Prince of Wales and heir to the throne, supports the institution and his father, and his relationship with his stepmother seems to have settled into a stable, respectful working partnership. It is not loud, it is not sentimental. It is 2 senior royals who have learned, over a very long time and through some very hard moments, to function as family in service of the same crown. There is one more part of this story, but it has to be flagged clearly for what it is, which is speculation rather than fact. Royal commentators have spent a lot of time wondering what will happen to Camilla's role when William eventually becomes king. Some experts suggest that her position within the monarchy may be reassessed at that point, that she might step back from frontline duties into a quieter, more private role, perhaps something along the lines of a queen dowager, while still appearing at the occasional engagement. Others note that Camilla reportedly values her responsibilities and is in no hurry to give them up. It's worth being honest that none of this is settled or announced. There is no plan written down that the public has seen, and predicting the inner workings of a future reign is guesswork, however well informed. What we can say is that the question exists, and that thoughtful people who follow the family take it seriously. How William handles Camilla's place when his time comes will be one of the early tests of his own reign. When you step back and look at the whole arc, what stands out is how little it resembles the sensational version that gets invented and passed around. There was no single explosive moment when William spoke out and changed everything. There was no secret uncovered, no shocking decision that stunned the royal court. The real story is the opposite of all that. It is a story of slow, undramatic adjustment over 25 years, a frightened first meeting in 1998, years of cool politeness. A gradual acceptance born of seeing a father made happy, a wedding attended and witnessed, a sister-in-law who helped build bridges, a firm, unspoken line drawn around a mother's memory, a brother who chose to go public while William chose to stay private, and finally, a season of illness that turned wariness into something closer to genuine appreciation. It's a story without villains in the end, which is exactly why the made-up versions feel so hollow by comparison. William didn't have to love Camilla. He had every reason as a grieving son not to. What he did instead was harder and quieter. He grew up. He put his father's happiness and the stability of the crown ahead of his own old hurt, and he found a way to stand beside a woman he might never have chosen, with dignity and without drama. That is not the stuff of shocking headlines. But it might be the better measure of the king he is going to be. Because in the long run, the monarchy has rarely been held together by the people who shouted the loudest. It has been held together by the ones who, like William, learned to carry the difficult things quietly and to keep showing up for family even when it was the hardest thing to do.